So forget this Dow 20K watch. If my next guest is right, we should be focusing more on debt 20 trillion watch. She is the president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Now, there is a concept. Again, it's good to have you back again, I mean, we're also focused on this 20K claim on the Dow that we're forgetting this other 20 gazillion something, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some timing differences, right? We've got a lot of optimism that we're seeing in markets right now and a lot of excitement about potential changes that could help business, corporate tax reform, regulatory reform, a lot of things that could do good, but none of them will last if they're not built on sustainable changes that help the economy. And the big one I would point out is, yes, while the Dow's approaching new time highs, so is the debt. And if we hit $20 trillion for the total debt sometime in January, that's going to be a huge reminder that Donald Trump is walking into office with the debt as a share of GDP the highest that we've ever seen, except for one other president. And so there are a lot of changes we're going to have to make to the policies if we want to keep the economy actually growing in a way that is sustainable, not just kind of a short-term boost.
Who's the one other president?
Truman.
Is that right? As a percentage of GDP?
That's right. Yeah, so debt as a share of GDP, which is what we think about as the most important indicator of the fiscal health of the economy, is so high right now because we came out of a huge downturn in 2008. As a result of that, our debt ran up, and we never put in place a plan that helped bring the debt back down. That's going to be something that's going to fall on the shoulders of the next administration to put in place a debt plan. Reince Priebus was just saying that it's really important that we think about ways to balance the budget, reduce our deficit, and put in place a long-term debt plan. That would be one of the best things that we could do for the longer-term sustainable growth of the economy.
I do think it's about the plan, stupid. I do think, not you, but that you've got to show a direction for getting a handle on this. And I think if the Trump administration to come can do that, much as Bill Clinton tried to do to win over the investment community, leery of a Democrat coming in, that can go a long way, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of pieces that you can do to increase confidence about our economy, and that's both putting in place a lot of reforms that will improve kind of the business environment, which is why I think, again, the markets are doing well. And on the plus side, of course, you've got tax reform, regulatory reform. On the negative side, we're still not sure where these trade changes or immigration changes, how they'll affect the business environment, which affects jobs and wages. But again, underpinning all of this is a sustainable growth plan, and that's not going to be built on deficit spending. And right now, the plans that are in place, all the policies, would add up to massive increases in the deficit, while the deficit's already too high, and looking forward, we'll be hitting $1 trillion if we don't make changes. And another thing to think about is linking all this to growing interest rates. If the Fed increases rates today, as we think it will, this is going to be kind of a painful reminder that we have been coasting on artificially low interest rates.
We could add $1 trillion to this, the blink of a higher interest rate high, very quickly.
We really could. Interest rates going up by 1 percentage point would add $1.5 trillion to our debt payments over a decade.
Wow.
That's real money.
What do you think that, real quick before we go here, if they do something on entitlements, something to curb either their continued advance, I don't think it would even have to be a Herculean type of a moment. Just something, anything, on pick one, to rein in its growth. It's still growing, but let's say take one from growing from 8% to 7.5%. I think that would return huge dividends.
I agree with you completely because, one, it has to be done, and if we make those changes now, we can do them on our own terms and terms that won't affect people who depend on the programs, whereas every year we wait, it becomes more costly. But two, like you're saying, you couldn't put in place very small changes today that don't even affect retirees, people who depend on the program, and they can be phased in and the savings would compound gradually. It would be exactly the right recipe to deal with our long-term debt that is growing out of control. And you just can't ignore entitlements. I know we tried to during the election, but they're half the budget. They're 3/4 of the growth of the spending in the entire federal budget. And to delay is really just sort of political cowardice instead of dealing with some of the bigger important challenges we have. So I agree with you completely there.
You're exactly right. It's so good having you on. I always learn a great deal. Thank you again.